The shuttle descended through the golden clouds of Karis Prime, the capital world of the Karis Empire. From above, the city looked like a living jewel. Towers of white stone and shining metal rose toward the sky, while wide bridges connected them like threads in a web. The streets below were alive with alien citizens, their tall frames and regal clothes showing the pride of an empire that had stood for thousands of years. Inside the shuttle, Captain Elias Ward sat quietly, watching the view without expression. He was Earth's youngest high-ranking diplomat, only in his early 30s, but already known for his sharp mind and steady voice. His mission was clear: represent humanity in the Karis court, secure trade agreements, and strengthen peaceful relations. The Karis were a proud people. They respected strength and skill, and they looked down on those who showed fear or arrogance. Earth had only recently been invited into their political circles, and many in the Empire believed humans were too young as a civilization to stand beside ancient powers. When the shuttle landed, a line of Karis guards stood waiting, their armor polished until it gleamed in the sunlight. In the center of the platform stood a young woman, tall even for her kind, wearing a flowing silver robe embroidered with the imperial crest. Her long hair was braided with thin strands of gold. Her eyes, a sharp shade of violet, studied Elias, with open curiosity and faint amusement. She was Princess Arvena, the 21-year-old heir to the Karis throne. Elias stepped forward, carrying no visible weapon, only a small translator device clipped to his collar. The guards made way for him, their movements precise, almost ceremonial. As he approached the princess, she raised her chin slightly, a gesture that signaled confidence among her people. "You are the human sent to speak for your world?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with superiority. "I am Captain Elias Ward," he replied evenly. "It is an honor to meet you, Princess." Arvena tilted her head, studying him for a long moment. Then, in a voice loud enough for the gathered nobles to hear, she said, "I expected more presence. Humans are smaller than I imagined. Perhaps the stories of your bravery are exaggerated." A few members of the court chuckled softly. The insult was clear. In Karis culture, questioning someone's worth in public was a way to test their reaction. Most would defend themselves with words or try to prove their value immediately. Elias did neither. He met her gaze for a brief moment, his expression calm and unreadable. Then, without a word, he gave a polite, almost respectful nod. Slowly, he turned away from her and walked toward the diplomatic escort waiting near the edge of the platform. The crowd murmured. Some of the nobles frowned, confused. Others whispered, among themselves wondering if this was human weakness or some strange form of confidence. Princess Arvena stood still, her smile frozen for a heartbeat before she regained her royal composure. No one had ever ignored her like that. Elias followed his escort into the grand hall of the palace. The interior was a masterpiece of alien architecture. Tall columns carved from single blocks of crystal, walls decorated with murals of past battles and victories. The ceiling arched high above, painted with constellations that shone faintly even in daylight. His aide, a young human named Mara, walked beside him. "Captain," she whispered once they were out of earshot of the court, "the princess's comment. I thought you'd respond." "There was nothing to respond to," Elias said quietly. "If someone wants to see anger, the most effective answer is to give them nothing. But in their culture—" "I know their culture," he interrupted gently. "They expect a display. But sometimes silence speaks louder than pride." Back on the landing platform, Princess Arvena remained where she was, watching the humans disappear into the palace. Her aide, a tall Karis officer, stepped closer. "Your Highness, was that wise? This human carries your empire's new trade treaty in his hands." "I simply wanted to see if the stories about humans were true," she said, her tone casual. I wanted to see fire in his eyes, but instead, she paused, remembering the way Elias had looked at her. Calm, steady, without even a trace of insult. Instead, he walked away. Her aide finished. Yes, Arvena murmured, and now I find myself curious. Later that evening, Elias was shown to his quarters, a set of rooms overlooking the city's central plaza. From his balcony, he could see the great spire of the imperial palace glowing in the fading light. Below, the streets were alive with music, street markets, and the scent of alien flowers carried on the wind. Mara set a datapad on the table. Tomorrow you'll attend the royal gathering. The entire court will be there. I suggest preparing a speech that answers today's comment in a polite way. Elias shook his head. No speeches. No answers. Let them wonder. You're playing a dangerous game, sir? She warned. Diplomacy is always a dangerous game, he replied, looking out at the city. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. In the palace's private wing, Arvena sat in her chamber, a map of Earth glowing on her desk. She traced the outlines of the continents with her finger, thinking about the young human captain. She had dealt with ambassadors before, some too proud, others too desperate to please. But Elias was different. His silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt deliberate. As though he had already decided her opinion didn't need to be changed. For someone raised in the center of power, that was a new and unsettling experience. Her brother, Prince Talric, entered the room. I heard you tried to put the human in his place, he said with a grin. Did he beg for your approval? Arvena frowned. No, he didn't even speak. Talric laughed. Perhaps he is afraid. Perhaps, she said softly, though she wasn't convinced. Or perhaps he's simply not playing the same game we are. That night, the city lights sparkled like stars below the palace, and two very different minds turned over the same question. Who exactly was Captain Elias? Ward! By the next morning, the palace was buzzing with whispers. What had happened on the landing platform between Princess Arvena and the human captain? Some said the human had been insulted so badly that he was too shocked to speak. Others claimed it was an intentional display, a way to show that humans did not bow to petty words. For a people who thrived on honor duels and verbal challenges, Elias Ward's quiet exit was the most unexpected reaction possible. And in the Kari's court, anything unexpected quickly became the center of attention. In the royal dining hall, Arvena sat at the long crystal table, the morning sun shining through tall stained glass windows. Servants moved quietly, laying plates of steaming food before the nobles. Across the table, her brother Prince Talric leaned back in his chair with a smirk. You realize, sister, that the entire court is talking about you, he said casually, picking at his plate. They always talk about me, Arvena replied, not looking up from her tea. This is different, Talric continued. They say you insulted the human, and he walked away like you didn't matter. Arvena set her cup down slowly. He did not ignore me. He surprised me, Talric chuckled. Surprised you? The great Princess Arvena surprised by a human? That is a headline worth printing. She ignored his teasing, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Elias Ward's calm face still lingered in her memory. Most people, when challenged, would defend themselves. He had done nothing. And yet, somehow it felt like he had still won something in that moment. Meanwhile, Elias sat in his assigned study room within the diplomatic quarters. A large table was covered with documents, trade proposals, cultural exchange plans, and lists of upcoming events. His aide, Mara, paced nearby. Captain, I have been reading the schedule for the next week, she began. There is something you should know. Elias looked up from a data slate. Go on. The princess has invited you to take part in the royal hunt tomorrow, Mara said cautiously. He raised an eyebrow. The royal hunt? Yes, Mara confirmed. It's an old Karis tradition. They travel to the moon of Varel, where the forests are full of dangerous wildlife. It's supposed to be ceremonial. But I've heard stories. Elias leaned back in his chair. Stories? Stories about accidents happening to guests who are inconvenient. There was a short silence. The sound of distant voices in the palace echoed through the open window. And you think this is a trap? Elias asked. I think, Mara said slowly, that the princess might want to test you. And on Varel, testing can mean risking your life. Elias closed the file in front of him. Then I'll need to prepare. In another part of the palace, Arvena stood in the royal armory, looking over a wall of ceremonial hunting weapons, long spears, curved energy bows, and silver-edged blades. Her hunting advisor, a tall Karis warrior named Velric, approached. You plan to invite the human to the hunt? Velric asked. Yes, Arvena said, selecting a sleek bow and testing its balance in her hand. Your Highness, Velric began carefully, the moon of Varel is no place for someone inexperienced in its dangers. Arvena's lips curved into a small smile. That is the point. If he is as capable as some claim, he will manage. If not, then the court will see the truth. Velric hesitated. And if he survives with skill? Arvena paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then perhaps I will begin to understand what makes him different. That evening, Elias and Mara met with a small team of human security staff. On the table before them lay a selection of Earth-made gear, compact tracking drones, lightweight armor plates, and a small but advanced device the size of a briefcase. Mara gestured to it. You're planning to take this? It's a portable gravnet, Elias explained. Originally designed for rescue missions, it can restrain a target without harm. One of the security officers frowned. The Karis prefer direct combat. This might be seen as unconventional. That's fine, Elias said calmly. I'm not here to imitate their traditions. I'm here to survive, and maybe teach them something. The next morning, the hunt party gathered at the spaceport. Sleek silver transports stood ready, their hulls reflecting the pale morning light. The nobles were dressed in ornate hunting attire, their weapons gleaming. When Elias arrived, wearing simple but functional gear, some of the Karis nobles looked him over and exchanged amused smiles. The princess stood near the boarding ramp, her bow slung across her shoulder. You accepted my invitation, she said as he approached. I did, Elias replied. Thank you for including me. Her tone carried a hint of challenge. I hope you can keep up. He gave a small nod. We'll see. As the transports lifted off, the city fell away beneath them, replaced by the dark curve of Varel's surface. Thick forests and mist-covered valleys stretched as far as the eye could. See? From above, it looked peaceful, but Elias knew better. When they landed, the air was cool and filled with the scent of wet leaves. Strange bird-like calls echoed through the trees. The hunting party formed a loose line as they moved into the forest. Arvena walked near the front, glancing back at Elias from time to time. He moved quietly, scanning the environment with steady focus. Velric leaned toward the princess. He doesn't seem nervous. Not yet, she replied. Hours into the hunt, the forest grew darker, the canopy blocking out much of the light. The sound of movement in the undergrowth made some of the younger hunters tighten their grip on their weapons. Then, without warning, a massive shadow burst from the trees. A scaled beast, twice the height of a man, its jaws lined with sharp teeth. The nobles scattered in alarm. Arvena instinctively raised her bow, But before she could fire, Elias stepped forward. He set the small device on the ground, pressing a button. In an instant, the gravnet sprang to life, a shimmering field wrapping around the beast. It struggled, roaring, but the invisible weight held it firmly in place without injury. The forest fell silent except for the creature's heavy breathing. Elias calmly approached, checking that the field was stable. Then he stepped back and simply said, "Safe to move." The nobles stared. Velric's eyes widened. Even Arvenna found herself momentarily speechless. After a pause, she said, "Efficient, for a soft-worlder." Elias gave a small nod. "We value efficiency." And once again, without waiting for further comment, he turned and walked on. That single moment, a human saving the royal hunt without raising a weapon, would be the second thing the court would whisper about for days to come. The forest on the moon of Virel was still humming with life after the encounter. Alien birds sang in high-pitched tones, and strange insect-like creatures clicked their wings as they moved through the undergrowth. The captured beast still held. In Elias's gravnet made low, frustrated growls, but it was unable to break free. The Caris nobles gathered around, speaking in hushed voices. Many of them had expected the human to either freeze in fear or charge recklessly into danger. Instead, Elias had acted with calm precision, saving the hunting party without spilling a drop of blood. Princess Arvenna stood a few paces away, her bow still in hand. She could not ignore the fact that her plan to test the human's courage had not gone as she expected. She had hoped to see him struggle, to watch him fail. Instead, he had ended the threat in seconds, and done it in a way none of the Caris had seen before. She approached him slowly, her boots crunching on the damp forest floor. "Tell me, Captain Ward," she began, "is this how humans always hunt? By trapping instead of fighting?" Elias glanced at her, his expression calm as always. "When the goal is survival, we use the method that works best. Fighting for glory is optional." A few of the nobles shifted uncomfortably. Among the Caris, the hunt was as much about honor as it was about skill. To hear someone dismiss the idea of glory was almost unthinkable. Arvenna tilted her head slightly. "Some would call that cowardice." "Some would," Elias agreed without hesitation. "But those people often don't live long." The answer was delivered without insult, yet it landed sharply. Arvenna narrowed her eyes, but she didn't reply. The hunting party continued deeper into the forest, leaving the restrained beast behind for retrieval later. The air grew thicker with mist, and the sounds of wildlife became fainter, as if the animals sensed something was near. Velric, the princess's hunting advisor, moved closer to her. "The human is dangerous," he said in a low voice. "Not because he is violent, but because he is clever. He makes others question their own ways." Arvenna kept her gaze forward. "I see that. And I think," Velric continued, "that some in the court will start to like him for it." She glanced at him sharply. "And others will not." A few hours later, the group reached a rocky clearing where they planned to rest. Small fires were lit for warmth and cooking, and the hunters shared quiet conversations. Elias sat apart from most of the nobles, checking the readings on a small scanning device. Mara approached him with a flask of water. "You're making quite the impression," she said, handing it over. "That was not the goal," Elias replied, sipping the water. "Maybe. Not, but you should know. Some of the nobles are already talking about you as if you're more than just a diplomat. They think you could be a military strategist." Elias didn't look up from his device. "That would make me a threat in their eyes, and threats don't last long in courts like this." Mara's voice dropped. "Do you think the princess meant for this hunt to be dangerous?" He finally looked at her. "Yes, but not necessarily to kill me. I think she wanted to see how I'd react under pressure. And what do you think she saw? Mara asked. Elias's lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile. Something she wasn't expecting. The rest was short-lived. As the fires burned low, a sudden cry came from the edge of the clearing. A young noble stumbled forward, his arm bleeding from a long, shallow cut. "Another one!" he shouted. "There's another beast, bigger than the first!" The camp erupted in motion. Hunters grabbed their weapons and formed a line. From the shadows of the trees, a massive shape emerged. Even larger than the earlier predator, its scales a darker shade, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Arvena drew her bow, but before she could fire, the beast lunged toward the group. The nobles scattered, but Elias moved with deliberate steps, positioning himself between the creature and the younger hunters. Instead of reaching for the grav net, he pulled a small device from his belt, a sonic emitter. With a quick adjustment, he activated it, sending out a pulse that made the beast pause, shaking its head as if disoriented. "Now!" Elias called. Velric and two other hunters took the opening, moving in with their energy spears to drive the creature back into the trees. Within moments it retreated, disappearing into the darkness. The hunters lowered their weapons, breathing heavily. Arvena looked at Elias with an unreadable expression. "You could have trapped it again." "Why not?" Elias shrugged lightly. "Because sometimes it's better to let danger go than to hold it too close." By the time the hunt ended and the transports returned to the capital, the mood among the nobles had shifted. What was meant to be a test of the human skill had turned into a display of adaptability and control. As they disembarked, Velric leaned toward Arvena. "You set out to prove his weakness. Instead, you showed his strength." Arvena said nothing, but in her mind, the thought had already taken root. Elias Ward was not like the others she had met. He did not care for flattery, did not chase approval, and did not fear disapproval. And that made him unpredictable. That evening, the royal court gathered for a small celebration marking the end of the hunt. Long tables were filled with exotic dishes, and the sound of soft music floated through the hall. Elias was seated near the end of one table, quietly observing the nobles as they spoke. A young Karis noble approached him, curiosity in his eyes. "Human," he said, "how did you learn to face danger without panic?" Elias set down his cup. "By understanding it, fear is useful, panic is not." The noble considered this, then nodded respectfully before walking away from across the hall. Arvena watched the exchange. She found herself wondering more and more about this human who had walked away from her insult without a word, and who kept surprising her at every turn. That night, as the city lights glittered outside her window, Arvena sat alone, her thoughts restless. In the beginning, she had seen Elias Ward as a test subject, nothing more than a representative of a young and untested world. Now, she wasn't so sure. The human was proving that strength did not always roar, that confidence could be quiet, and that sometimes walking away could be the most powerful move of all. And Arvena, for the first time in years, was eager to see what would happen next. The morning after the hunt, the city of Karis Prime was full of fresh gossip. Word had spread quickly. The human diplomat had not only survived the royal hunt, but had saved the princess's party twice. Many nobles were impressed, but others were suspicious. The Imperial Council, the Empire's highest governing body, was set to meet that day to discuss trade, security, and the fragile new relationship with Earth. Captain Elias Ward had been invited to attend, though it was unusual for an outsider to be present during such discussions. Inside the council chamber, the air was cool and heavy with formality. The round table in the center was made from black stone taken from the moon's deepest mines, polished until it reflected the high ceiling. Around it sat 12 of the most powerful figures in the empire, their eyes sharp and their voices calm, but full of authority. Princess Arvena sat at her designated place, her silver ceremonial robe draped perfectly over her shoulders. She saw Elias enter, walking with the same steady pace he always had. He bowed slightly to the emperor, then took the seat reserved for him. The session began with discussions of border disputes between the Karis Empire and a rival power known as the Drevek Coalition. Reports of Drevek warships moving near contested sectors had caused unease among the council. Elias listened silently as one noble argued for immediate military action, while another insisted on waiting for more evidence. The debate grew tense, voices rising slightly, though still within the boundaries of court etiquette. Finally, Emperor Kaelar turned his gaze toward Elias. "And what does the human representative think?" A few council members shifted uncomfortably. Some clearly didn't like that an outsider had been asked to speak. Elias folded his hands on the table. "If I may, Your Majesty, the Drevek are not moving blindly. They are testing your response. I believe they have already established hidden supply lines here." He tapped a small control on his wrist device, and a holomap appeared above the table. Red lines traced across sectors of space, showing the movement of ships and the location of unmarked stations. "This data," Elias continued, "comes from human satellites in deep observation. They are not as large as Karis probes, but they operate at higher frequency scans. We have confirmed Drevek staging areas in 3 locations." The map shifted, zooming in to reveal images of Drevek ships hidden in asteroid fields. Gasps and murmurs moved through the room. Several council members exchanged looks, clearly surprised at the detail of the human intelligence. One elder noble, Lord Vareth, narrowed his eyes. "You speak boldly, human, but your people are new to the great stage. What makes you think your evidence outweighs our own patrol reports?" Elias met his gaze calmly. "Because your patrols were never meant to find these ships. They were meant to send a message, one the Drevek saw coming. This, they did not see." Lord Vareth's expression tightened. "You speak above your station." At that moment, Elias could have defended himself sharply. But instead, he leaned back slightly and said, "You can ignore my voice, but you cannot ignore the truth." Then, with quiet confidence, he switched off the holomap. The chamber went silent for a long moment. Princess Arvena sat still, hiding her reaction. But inside, she felt the same small jolt she had felt during the hunt, the sense that Elias Ward was not simply a diplomat passing through their empire. He had brought something new into the room, a kind of strength that didn't need volume or threats. Emperor Kaelar finally broke the silence. "The humans' data will be examined. Until then, our fleets will remain in defensive posture. But we will not be caught unprepared." There were murmurs of agreement, though Lord Vareth's expression remained cold. When the meeting adjourned, the nobles filed out, speaking in low voices. Arvena stepped toward Elias, her hands clasped behind her back. "You took a risk showing that data," she said quietly. "Some will see it as a challenge to their authority." Elias gave a faint shrug. "If the truth challenges them, perhaps they should consider why." "You are not making friends," she warned. "I'm not here to make friends," he replied, his tone even. "I'm here to make sure your empire and mine are ready for what's coming." Arvena studied him for a moment. "And you believe this Drevek threat is real?" "I believe it's already begun," he said. That evening, as the city lights glowed beneath the palace, Arvena sat in her private study. The events of the council replayed in her mind. Elias's calm presentation had unsettled the room in a way few could manage. His words, "You can ignore my voice, but you cannot ignore the truth," stayed with her. Velric entered quietly. "Your Highness," The hunt made the court curious about the human. Today's council has made them cautious. Some say he is useful. Others say he is dangerous. Arvena tapped her fingers lightly on the desk. Both can be true. Do you trust him? Velric asked. She hesitated. I don't know if trust is the right word, but I want to understand him. And for that, I need to see him tested again. In the human quarters, Mara paced while Elias stood at the balcony, looking out at the sprawling city. You know you've made enemies today, Mara said. Yes, Elias replied simply, and you don't seem concerned. If someone fears the truth, their fear is not my problem, Elias said, turning back toward her. But if they act on that fear, then it becomes my problem, and I deal with it. Mara sighed, knowing she would never fully understand how he could remain so calm under constant political pressure. Late that night, Arvena looked out over the quiet gardens below her chamber. She thought of the moment she had insulted Elias, on the landing platform, expecting a display of human defensiveness. Instead, he had walked away without a word. That single act had forced her to look twice. Since then, every test she had put before him had only revealed more layers: skill without arrogance, strength without cruelty, truth without fear, and now, with the Drevek threat looming, she realized something important. If there was a storm coming, Elias Ward might be the one person she wanted standing in it with her. The day after the council meeting, a message arrived in the human diplomatic quarters. It was short and formal, sealed with the royal crest. Captain Elias Ward is invited by Her Highness Princess Arvena to take part in the test of honor. Mara read it twice before handing it to Elias. You know what this means, right? She asked. Yes, Elias replied calmly. This isn't a friendly invitation. The test of honor is one of the oldest traditions in the Caris Empire. It's meant to prove worth or expose weakness. Elias glanced at her. Then I suppose we'll see which one they find. In the grand courtyard of the palace, preparations were already underway. The test of honor was divided into 3 stages, each designed to challenge a different quality: courage, intellect, and resolve. Dozens of nobles gathered to watch, filling the high balconies around the courtyard. The emperor himself was present, seated on a raised platform with the council at his side. Princess Arvena stood nearby, wearing light ceremonial armor and holding a short spear. She stepped forward, her voice carrying over the crowd. Captain Elias Ward, representative of Earth, you have spoken boldly in our halls and acted decisively in our hunts, but words and isolated deeds are not enough to earn the trust of the Caris. Today, you will face the test of honor. Pass, and your standing will rise. Fail. She let the silence speak for itself. Elias nodded once. I understand. Stage 1. Courage. The first stage was a physical trial. A section of the courtyard had been transformed into a training arena filled with shifting platforms, swinging weights, and narrow beams suspended over pools of water. At the far end, a large metal gate stood closed. The goal, the announcer explained, is to cross the arena and open the gate before time runs out. Elias stepped onto the first platform. The moment he did, the mechanisms activated. Platforms shifted under his feet, poles swung down from above, and jets of water sprayed upward. The Caris prided themselves on speed and agility, and most competitors completed the course by moving fast and taking risks. But Elias moved differently, not rushing, not hesitating. He calculated each step, shifting his weight when the platform tilted, ducking only when a pole passed close enough to touch. When he reached the final stretch, 2 large mechanical arms swung toward him in a synchronized pattern. Instead of forcing his way through, he paused, studied their timing, and stepped forward at the exact moment the arms crossed each other, passing harmlessly by. He reached the gate with time to spare. The crowd murmured, some impressed, others unsure what to make of his steady, deliberate approach. Stage 2, Intellect. The second stage took place in the Council's war chamber. A massive holographic map of the border regions hovered above the table. On one side of the map was the Karis fleet, on the other, simulated enemy forces. The challenge was to command a fleet and achieve victory with minimal losses. Elias was given control of a set of holographic ships, while his opponent was a skilled Karis strategist chosen by the Council. The Karis strategist attacked aggressively, pushing forward with heavy warships in the center. Many in the audience nodded approvingly. This was the traditional style of Karis warfare. Elias, however, used a different method. He feigned weakness on one flank, drawing the opponent's forces toward it, then used fast-moving ships to cut off their supply lines in the rear. While the opponent focused on winning the center, Elias quietly surrounded their command ships. Within minutes, the simulation ended. The Karis strategist had lost nearly all major vessels, while Elias's fleet remained largely intact. Some nobles looked uncomfortable. This was not the kind of victory they celebrated, but it was undeniably a victory. Stage 3, Resolve. The final stage was the most unusual. It was not about physical skill or strategy. It was about endurance under pressure. Elias and Princess Arvena were led into a small chamber with no windows. In the center was a table with 2 sealed documents. One contained details of a false but dangerous accusation against the human delegation. The other contained the truth, but with no proof that it would be accepted. The test was simple. Choose which document to present to the Council. The false one would protect Elias's position in the short term, but risk dishonor if exposed. The true one might cause immediate conflict, but would keep his integrity intact. Arvena watched him closely, her eyes sharp. "Well, Captain, which will you choose?" Elias didn't take long. He picked up the true document and set it aside. "The truth doesn't need to be convenient to be worth telling." Arvena tilted her head. "Even if it costs you everything?" "Yes," he said simply. When they emerged from the chamber, the Emperor asked for his decision. Elias spoke clearly. "The truth is the only foundation for trust. Without it, any alliance is already broken." There was a long silence in the courtyard. Then the Emperor gave a single nod. "You have passed the test of honor." As the crowd dispersed, Arvena approached Elias. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You've passed every trial I've placed before you," she said, "but I still don't understand you. You don't seek approval. You don't fight for glory. And yet, you keep winning." Elias's answer was calm. "Because I don't see these as battles. I see them as choices, and I make the ones I can live with." For the first time since they had met, Arvena gave him a small, genuine smile. "Perhaps there's more honor in that than I thought." That night, in her private chambers, Arvena replayed the events of the day in her mind. The human had passed the test of honor without ever trying to impress anyone, and somehow that made the victory even greater. For the first time, she began to think that perhaps the insult she had thrown at him on the day of his arrival had been the greatest mistake she'd made in years. The morning sun rose over Karis Prime, casting a golden glow over the palace towers. The great courtyard was alive with the hum of preparation. Flags bearing both the Karis imperial crest and Earth's emblem waved in the soft breeze. Today was the Royal Alliance ceremony, a formal declaration that the Karis Empire and Earth would enter into a strategic partnership. It was the kind of event that would be remembered for decades. Captain Elias Ward stood in the side hall, adjusting the collar of his formal uniform. Beside him, Mara glanced over the crowd gathering outside. "You know," she said, "this could have gone very differently. When you arrived, most of them didn't even want you here. And now She nodded toward the open courtyard, where nobles and dignitaries from across the empire were finding their seats. "Now they're here to see you stand beside the royal family." Elias gave a small, quiet smile. "It's not about me. It's about what comes after this day." In the main courtyard, Princess Arvena stood near the ceremonial platform. She wore a robe of deep silver lined with white, the symbol of unity between her empire and an ally. Her violet eyes scanned the crowd, but her thoughts drifted to the very first time she'd seen Elias, stepping off that shuttle, calm and silent, after she had insulted him in front of everyone. She remembered how he'd simply nodded, turned, and walked away without a word. At the time, she had thought it was weakness. Now, she knew it had been something else entirely, a strength that didn't need to shout. The emperor arrived, greeted by a formal bow from the assembly. He gestured for the ceremony to begin. The master of events stepped forward, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Today, the Charis Empire and the world known as Earth will seal a pact of trust and cooperation. This alliance has been forged not only through words, but through trials, courage, and honor." He turned toward Elias. "Captain Elias Ward, representative of Earth, step forward." Elias walked steadily toward the platform. His pace was measured, neither hurried nor slow, each step carrying the quiet weight of someone who understood the moment. The master of events recounted the story of the royal hunt, the council meeting where Elias had presented undeniable truth, and the test of honor he had passed without compromise. Every event was spoken of with care, showing the gathered audience why this human had earned the respect of their leaders. Finally, the emperor held out a small silver medallion shaped like the crest of the empire. "Elias Ward, for your actions and your service to truth, you are awarded the Charis Medal of Honor. Wear it as a sign that your voice carries weight in this empire." Elias accepted it with a respectful bow. "Thank you, Your Majesty." After the formal words, Princess Arvena stepped forward. There was no script for what she was about to say, but the crowd quieted as she began to speak. "When Captain Ward first arrived," she said, her voice steady, "I doubted him. I doubted his people. I doubted the value they could bring to the Charis Empire. I tested him, perhaps unfairly, and each time I expected him to try to prove himself to me." She glanced at Elias, but he never tried to impress me. He simply acted according to his own code, without anger, without pride, and without fear. And in doing so, he proved more than I ever expected. There was a ripple of murmurs in the crowd. Arvena continued. "On his first day here, I insulted him. I thought it would unsettle him. Instead, he walked away without a word. That silence was not weakness. It was strength. A strength that we would all do well to understand." The emperor signaled for the final act of the ceremony. A ceremonial scroll bearing the alliance agreement was brought forward. Both Elias and Arvena signed it in view of the entire assembly. When the signatures were complete, the crowd rose in applause. The sound echoed off the palace walls, a mix of approval and curiosity for what the future would bring. That evening, after the formal events had ended, Elias found himself walking through the palace gardens. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of alien flowers. Lanterns glowed softly along the stone paths. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Arvena approaching. She had changed into simpler attire, her ceremonial robe replaced with a light cloak. "I thought you'd be at the banquet," Elias said. "I've had enough banquets for one lifetime," she replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I wanted to speak to you without a crowd." They walked together in silence for a moment, the quiet of the gardens wrapping around them. "You've changed my view of your people," Arvena admitted, "and of you." When I first saw you walk away from me, I thought you were avoiding the fight. Now I see you were choosing it, just not in the way I expected. Elias stopped near a small fountain. Sometimes the loudest answer is no answer. At all, he said. She gave a small nod. You know, I think that walk, that one moment of silence, changed more than you realize. It started everything that followed. He looked at her, then at the fountain's rippling water. Maybe. Or maybe everything was always going to happen this way. The distant hum of the city reached the garden, soft and faint. Somewhere beyond, the palace walls, ships moved in the sky, carrying goods, people, and the first shipments agreed upon under the new alliance. Whatever happens next, Arvena said quietly, you've left your mark on the Karis Empire, and you've left yours on me, Elias replied simply. They stood there for a moment longer, the silence between them no longer the sharp, uncertain pause of strangers, but the comfortable quiet of allies who had faced trials together and emerged stronger. When Elias left Karis Prime days later, the palace balcony was filled with nobles and guards. But in the crowd, the one person his gaze found was the princess. She gave him the smallest of nods, the same kind of nod he had given her on the day they met. It was a silent exchange, but both knew what it meant. Sometimes, the greatest changes start with a single step, and a walk away without a word.